Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, if this is your first time listening to the What is Money Show, I strongly recommend that you go back to episodes 1 through 9 first, which lays a lot of the groundwork for many of the concepts that we explore on the show. These first 9 episodes are my series with Michael Saylor, and thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard, hands down, and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I don't think there's any place better that you can start other than episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The What is Money Show is 100% sponsor based. So all of our revenues are derived from direct sponsorships. And I strive to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically only using sponsors that I use personally, and also choosing sponsors that have values which are well aligned to the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do now is a few ad reads right at the top of the show, and then I'll do a few more ad reads in the middle. And I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as again, these are hand-selected sponsors, and I think you'll like what they have to offer. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Ledn. Ledn lets you do more with your digital assets. For instance, Ledn offers a B2X loan product that lets you leverage your existing Bitcoin to buy even more Bitcoin. Or you can also get traditional Bitcoin collateralized US dollar loans through Ledn as well. Ledn also offers both Bitcoin and USDC denominated savings accounts, letting you generate yield on your digital assets. Recently, Ledn has launched a Bitcoin mortgage product as well that lets you use Bitcoin to buy a home or finance one that you already own. So go to ledn.io, that's LEDN.io today to sign up. Richard Hurd, welcome to the What is Money Show.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And just by way of quick introduction, you are the founder and president of Hurd Real Estate, which is a super regional real estate investment and development company. I think you said you guys have properties in over 20 states in the US, and you have about 40 years in this game. And I know it's been a long path that we're going to get into today, talking about your life story, your early career, your early entrepreneurial activities, then your early career, and finally getting into the commercial real estate game that you're involved in today. So thank you for joining me on this journey. And I guess to kick it off, let's just go back to the beginning. And could you please tell us a little bit about where you grew up, how you grew up, and we'll go from there.
Well, I'm from Des Moines, Iowa. Grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in the south side of Des Moines, Iowa. Went to public school, and it was pretty typical of that era. I'm a baby boomer. All my friends' fathers were World War II vets, and it was kind of like if you watch any of the old TV shows. Everybody lived on the same street, all had pretty much the same standard of living, same, station wagon, the mom stayed home and so forth. So it was pretty typical for a baby boomer upbringing. Had a great time. Got my first job was being a paper boy. I was around 10, and that was a lot of good experience there, learning how to deal with all the trials and tribulations of the weather in the Midwest, in the wintertime, to try to get the papers delivered. And then, as I got older and in high school, I got a job working at a gas station and worked at a gas station all the way through high school. So there's really nothing unusual about my childhood and upbringing other than it was pretty much what you see and what you'd expect for a baby boomer.
Mm. And those growing up in Iowa, I imagine the winter time is quite brutal there. How cold does it get in the wintertime in Iowa?
Well, I mean, it just, it gets below zero and you get snow. So, I mean, those are the issues when you're a paper boy, but, and then the summertime, it gets hot and humid. So we have the extreme high and extreme lows.
Extreme high, extreme lows. Very cool. And then, so you mentioned high school, and this is where I also, you are the father of a friend of mine, so that's how I've heard some of these stories secondhand. But as we were talking offline, I guess this is the first entrepreneurial activity you got into was buying and selling cars in high school.
Right, yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what exactly were you doing, and what were you looking out for, and how were you turning a profit?
Well, it was generational. So, my generation, cars were kind of like cell phones and computers are for kids today. That was your freedom. That's how you saw your friends. You got in your car and you drove to McDonald's and you all hung out there. That's where you connected. Now kids don't need to do that. They just get on their cell phone and either text or, call or whatever method of communication. But so cars were a big deal for our generation. The other thing to keep in mind is that the cost to have a car back then relative to wages, purchasing power for a kid back in the late 60s was much greater than it is today.
Mm-hmm.
I was buying, my first car was like $1,200. I could make $2 an hour working at a gas station. So you can do the math. I mean, you can afford it as a kid. And so I started buying cars and actually started washing cars for some of the people on my paper route, if you want to know the truth. When I was like 12 or 13 in the summertime, I would deliver their paper, then go back and wash their car and get paid for that. And then I bought my first car when I was 15 and couldn't drive it till I was 16, but fixed it up. And, some of the kids at school, somebody wanted it. So I sold it and bought another one and just repeated that time and time again throughout high school. And then I started buying other types of vehicles like pickup trucks and things like that. And driving my dad crazy because I'd bring home all this stuff and he'd say, "There's no room in the driveway. Don't buy anything else." So I started parking them a block away. He wasn't too impressed with that. And then, if I get in trouble or lose my license, the problem is he couldn't keep track of how many vehicles I had. So he didn't know if I was driving or not, which I obviously was, but shouldn't have been. So that was kind of what happened during high school. Turned out to be a good experience. I mean, it gives you the opportunity to look and try to understand what the market is, what values are, and what people want. And can you buy something, improve it, and turn around and sell it to somebody for a price that they'll pay and you can actually make a profit. So that's what I did.
Do you think you were born with this inkling to be entrepreneurial and try to assess what people want and buy low, sell high, or is this something you just kind of fell into, or how do you think?
Oh, I think some of it's innate. I think some of it also is just the desire to improve.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were very middle class. There was nobody on our block had more than one car. Mm-hmm. So when dad was away at work, moms didn't have any transportation as a kid. And I think it just, you aspire to do better, right? So as a kid, again, you have to realize the time frame. Having a nice car was a big deal because it was the way that you got around. It was the way you were able to show people that you're actually doing something rather than doing nothing.
Mm.
So to me, it was just, okay, I got to do this in order to make some money so I can actually have a car, number one. And then once I got one, then I wanted to get a better one. And it's no different than any business. It's just small scale. I mean, it's just a kid wanting to improve themselves, improve their position, no different than, a tech company, trying to get the next technological idea or advancement or buying a competitor. You're trying to improve. It's just really small scale. And I think for me, a lot of it was just how I'm wired. But because I had a lot of friends that didn't do that. Most of my friends, frankly, didn't do that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So some of it's just, who you are, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure there's got to be a nature component to it to some extent. Otherwise you wouldn't keep doing it. Was there a nurture component too? Like, was this something that your parents encouraged you to pursue more, or how did that relationship work out?
Well, my parents were divorced. I lived with my dad. He worked all the time. So, but he had his own business. And so I think I get all this from him. He was very independent. He and my grandfather had a sign company, and he always encouraged me to be independent and be entrepreneurial thinking all the time. He encouraged me to do well in school, but he also told me, don't just follow the books, think outside of what the books teach you. Take what you can get from the school and apply it to real life. And my dad, and most people probably listening to this, either don't have parents that were World War II vets, but maybe you have grandparents. But that generation was they had the most ingenuity of anybody I've ever known. They could take, baling wire and duct tape and fix about anything. Those guys were taught, you don't call a specialist to fix the problem. You fix the problem yourself. You think about what is it going to take to fix this? And then you set about doing it. And every father of every friend I had who was a World War II vet had that ability. They were taught that when you're out there in the field, there's nobody to call. Mm-hmm. You got to think on your own, think on your feet, think fast, and get a solution and implement it. And I think that was impactful for me because my dad was that way. I mean, he always told me, don't call somebody else. You think about it and you figure it out. What's it going to take? One time I bought a truck. It didn't have any brakes, and I didn't know that until I bought it. He says, well, you're halfway across the lake. You better keep swimming because you own it. So I learned how to fix the brakes. I mean, there's a lot of lessons from that generation that was passed down to my generation. I think were just invaluable, quite frankly.
Yeah, I'm sure. And we've drifted so far from that now. Like even looking at myself, someone that tries to be self-sufficient, I can't fix anything with duct tape and baling wire. So we've become, I guess, as we've become more comfortable in the US, we've become a little bit softer too. So we probably lost a lot of that wisdom that people like your father had earned the hard way, presumably. Okay, so the buying and selling cars, like, is this something you did throughout high school? Like, how did this become a business? Like, how was it just a hobby? How often or how engaged were you in that activity?
Well, it was not a business. It was a means to an end, right? It was a way for me to end up with a better car all the time. Every time I sold one and made a profit, bought a better one. So by the time I was in a junior in high school, I was driving Corvettes because I started with Chevys.
Hmm.
I kept buying them, selling them, and I was able to buy Corvettes, which was pretty good for a high school kid. Graduated at 17 in 1970, and that was the period of time where they had enacted the lottery for the draft during the Vietnam period, and there was no deferment. So if you got a low number, you're going to be drafted.
Mm.
So my buddies and I, all being the smart high school kids we were, we thought, well, we'll just go look at enlisting, and then that way we won't get drafted, and we'll at least have a better shot at what we do. And so anyway, long story short, we did that. And since I wasn't 18, I had to get my dad's permission, but it turned out to be a good thing because, we graduated, all of us went in the service. I went in at 17, and I really could use the discipline. Quite frankly, that is something that I hated at the time, but I have to tell you, it was really good for me because there was no talking your way out of it. I mean, you're there, they own you, you do what they say, or there's a place called the Stockade that you will reside. So it was good. I mean, it was good for me, quite frankly. I never got in that much trouble in the service, but when you're a high schooler, you don't obey. There's limited things that the school or your parents can do to you. Military, back in those days at least, there's a lot of things they could do to you. So it was good for me.
Did your dad support that when I assume you went to your dad and said, "Hey, I want to enlist," and he just fully supported that?
Yeah, and what he said was, "Look, there's a number of different ways you could go. Number one, you can take your chances with a lottery. We'll see what your number is. You get a low number, you're gone. Number two, you can enlist. If you enlist, you get a chance to choose." And he gave me some great advice, and that was, if you enlist, I would suggest you go to the Navy or the Air Force because if you go to one of those branches, you're either on a ship or on a base. If you go to the Army or the Marines, you're going to be infantry. You're going to be you're going to be out, on the rice paddies. Mm-hmm. So he said, pick one of those other two and enlist in one of those, and at least you'll be on a base. And it turned out I never went anywhere, but, in the U.S. and came back, went in the Guard. We converted. It was really not a big deal. As far as the service portion of it, I had a lot of friends that went to Vietnam. We never came close to going overseas. So, but it was a good experience for me. It really was.
The experience of just going through, I guess you went through boot camp and.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And tech school, and just going from an environment where you weren't required to do everything that you were told to do, to an environment where you had no choice but to do everything you were told to do. And, I think a lot of times young people, myself definitely falls into this category, was that I needed that. I needed that structure at that point. And I think it helped me a lot, quite frankly. I mean, not everybody needs it, but some of us do. And I was one of them that really needed it.
So do you think it was the discipline or disciplinary framework? Perhaps it was a very tight schedule, I imagine, that when you were enlisted, you were doing certain things at the same time every day. Are those the types of things that benefited you later in life, or what specifically do you think, specific lessons, I guess, that you gleaned there that helped you going forward in life?
Well, I was a fairly rebellious kid. So, just to be candid about it. So that's why it was good. I think it was good for me. Mm-hmm. Most of my friends were not as rebellious as I was. I think that the realization that if you want to, let's back up a minute. If I wanted to advance in life in any way, shape, or form, either educationally, economically, just in a social setting, I needed to change a lot of the things that I was doing. You couldn't go through life being a rebellious teenager, right? I mean, that doesn't work when you get into your 20s. So I realized that if I wanted to improve, I needed to change the way I was approaching life in a lot of ways. And it gave me the structure to do that. It's not the repetitiveness. I think it was the realization that there are rules and regulations in this world and in the US. And if you want to succeed, there are certain things that you need to do in order to achieve your goals. And I'd always been pretty good at goal setting. And so I knew that I wanted to do better from a financial standpoint. I knew that I wanted to do better from an education standpoint. And in order to achieve that, I needed to do these things. And the military kind of gave you a perspective that here's the structure. You can either like it or don't. I did not like the structure of the military. It was too much for me. But it's kind of like if you think about a pendulum, if you swing all the way over to one side, that's where I was. They're on the other side, and it gets you back a little bit more toward the center. And that was good. And so when I got out of, when I came home and then I went to college, I was able to conform to the, what professors wanted and so forth, even though I struggled big time to find my way. I was not particularly interested in the subject matter that I was being taught in college. And that's just the fact. I mean, I did it, but I wasn't one of these kids that says, hey, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to be a dentist. I'm going to be an attorney. I'm going to be a CP. I had none of those aspirations at that point.
You mentioned one other thing about the military service. You mentioned the stockade, I think was the term you used.
That's what they call the prison. I mean, they have stockade that's their on-base prison, basically. They lock you up.
Okay, so you don't conform to the framework of what?
I mean, you have all these rules, right? So you got to be on duty at 0600. That means you're on duty at 0600. It doesn't mean you show up like going to high school, you 10 minutes late and they slap you on the wrist. No, if you're not there, you had to meet all the rules back then. I mean, I presume it's still the same today, but yeah, I mean, you didn't, there was no leeway. There was no deviation, right? So the stockade was just, some people, and I did see some guys get put in there not for long periods. You go to the stockade for a day or two, give you another chance. That's what it was about. I was never put in the stockade. I was not about to. One of the things that I learned from my dad also is a man's got to know his limitations. And it was clear to me that I could not compete with the military. They're going to tell me what to do. And I was not about to get in a position where I was going head to head with the DI or one of the officers. I just let it, But that was part of the learning process, right?
Right.
And it helps you realize how the structure of our society works.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be difficult for a rebellious young man, just to come into circumstances of very hard laws, right? Iron laws, I guess. But also, I would imagine that you'd take away a lot of self-discipline from that. Not that you would lack it before, but maybe you could make your self-discipline more structured, right? You maybe learned things following that structure that you could then import into your lifestyle. I'm assuming. Um, okay, that's all really interesting to hear about. So military service, and then you go into college, and you said you
Correct.
weren't particularly interested in the subject matter you were studying, which was.
Liberal arts. I just came back, went to college, really more interested in just, you know, something to do at that point. I mean, you got to keep in mind, I was still pretty young. And so um, it just didn't appeal to me. And so I, again, talking to my dad one day, um, and you also got to keep in mind, my parents were divorced. I lived with my dad
Yeah.
all through. So I talked to my mom too, but it wasn't quite the same as it was with my dad because he's the one that I lived with for 6 years. Anyhow, and I'm talking to him, and he says, "Well, what do you think? You got some, perspective on what you want to do. What are you going to study? What are you going to be?" I said, "I have absolutely no idea. Nothing's ringing true with me that taking. I really don't know what to tell you." And so he suggested that, I take a look at real estate. And it was his view that that could be a match for me. So that's where the idea came from. It was not my idea to go into real estate. It was my father's. And parents have a unique ability to see things in their kids that kids don't see in themselves a lot of times. He saw something in me where he thought that I could possibly be good at, dealing with real estate. And so he encouraged me to do that.
Very good. Were you still into cars at that time? When you came back, were you doing the cars?
No, not a little, not nearly as much. Times had changed. I mean, you have to have the context of the era. Cars were a big deal up until the early 70s. And then they changed the cars, and they were no longer fast, and they were no longer as big a deal. And so it wasn't and I was no longer in high school. So finding, buying cars and selling them to high schoolers wasn't probably, so I'd kind of phased out of that, and I was going to college and didn't really have time to mess with it as much, then. So, the real estate thing was my dad's idea. And he said, you had done really well acknowledging and recognizing value in cars. He says, "I think you could do it in real estate too if you apply yourself." And I said, "Well, I really don't know anything about it. Cars, I understand. They're pretty simple for me. Real estate, I don't understand. It's a much bigger number to buy it. It involves financing. It involves all kinds of things that were foreign to me." And I said, I don't really know where to begin. He says, "Well, let's just go out and look. Go out and see if we can find something." So we looked and found this repo house that was just all beat up. And it was owned by a bank. It was a bank repo. And he said, "Why don't you write an offer on it?" So I wrote an offer and immediately got rejected by the bank and got this letter. And my dad took it in. I said, "Well, I thought you told me to go buy this house." And the banker that owned it said they wanted rid of it in the worst way. And they gave me a rejection letter. He said, "Well, you didn't really think they were going to loan you any money. You don't have any visible means of support. You're unemployed." He says, why don't I talk to him?" So my dad talked to him, and they said, "Well, if you co-sign, we'll let him buy it." But it was like a single digit house. I want to say it was like $6,000. I mean, again, 1973, most houses were selling in the 20s back then. So it was a junker. And so we set about remodeling it. he helped me. He gave me direction and taught me what to do, told me what to do. And we went and remodeled it, and put it on the market and sold it, and pretty much opened my eyes to the fact that I could make as much on one property as I could make working pretty much all year in a typical job for that time period. For either somebody with a skilled trade or fresh out of college. So that got me interested, quite frankly.
And this was, so your dad co-signs with you, you get the property, and then is it the two of you setting out to physically remodel this thing, or you just kind of, doing all the work?
We did all the work. And, I didn't have any money. He had the knowledge. And as I said, those guys, that generation, they are extremely entrepreneurial, and they had a lot of ingenuity. And most of those guys could figure out how to fix about anything. And he helped me do all the things we needed to do, the plumbing, the electrical. We just pulled the meter, shut the house down, redid the electric, sheetrock, paint. About the only thing I think we hired was the carpet, floor covering, and mechanical work. Everything else we did ourselves.
Wow.
And turned out to be fine. Worked well.
And you were learning, obviously, all of those skills as you went, I suppose.
Right.
Your dad had the knowledge and the skills, and he's sort of teaching them to you as you go. That must have
He's
been
telling
actually
me.
fun, I guess, in retrospect. I mean, I'm sure it was obviously a slog of a job,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, he was, but no, he was the one. He was telling me what to do. Do this, let's focus here. Let's work on this. This is our job for today. One of the things that I learned from him, and again, I keep harping on it, but that generation had the ability to take problems. They're the greatest generation were great problem solvers.
mm-hmm.
They were able to take things apart and compartmentalize them and address it that way. So every time I'd be overwhelmed, and this happened later when I was in the development world and building a building, and it was just a little mind-boggling. I said, man, I don't know. I don't know where to begin with this. There's too many moving parts. I can't figure out where to begin. He said, well, why are you stressing out so much about where to begin? Take it a floor at a time. Break it down. Start here, do this, work on what you can understand and comprehend and deal with, and then move on to the next set. And there are so many lessons that you can learn from the people that built our country, not just their generation, the generation before them, and the generation before them. It's amazing what people did in order to develop this country in such a short period of time. I mean, what are we, 220 some years old, and there was virtually nothing here but raw land.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing when you stop and think about it.
Oh, that is amazing. I like that. Take it a floor at a time. Kind of reminds me of that. What's the biblical phrase? Sufficient unto the day or the evils thereof, kind of thing, where you just got to take it incrementally, right? That's how else do you do big things. Easy to say, but harder to maybe implement in those moments where you actually are feeling overwhelmed.
Right.
I know that feeling, actually, and it's not a fun one. So, okay, then how long does that take you then? You said you earned on selling that first house as much as you thought you would working a typical job. So how long was that whole renovation process?
I think from beginning to end, it was like 6 or 7 months. It was, from the time we bought it, started working on it, demoed it, put it back together, put it on the market, and it sold right away because it was an old house, but it was basically all new at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Sold right away and got the money. And I thought, well, this works.
Hmm.
This and you got to also keep in mind there was no DIY TV and a buying houses and rehabbing them was not considered a valid occupation.
Right.
When I can go to the bank, what's your job? Well, I'm rehabbing houses. No, what is your job? What do you do for a living? What's your career? Well, this is my career. No, what is it you're going to do once you're done with this house? I'm going to buy another one. But that was not recognized as a valid career path back
right
by the banking world.
Yes.
And so, we just, bought another one and did it. My dad would help me, and from time to time, then it got to the point where he didn't have to put money in. I don't think he co-signed. I don't think he put money in, but he co-signed on the first one. Second one, I don't recall whether he co-signed or not, but about the third one, he didn't have to. He still helped me.
Yeah.
I mean, he helped me for years, doing things as parents do, right?
Yeah.
But it was good. And then I finally got a chance to buy a duplex, and I thought, okay, well, this is better. I got 2 renters in one property instead of one. And, I would sell in the early ones, I'd sell them all because they didn't have any money. Then I got enough money to keep one and rent it and buy one and fix it. And then I finally got to the point where I bought an apartment building, like 12 units. And that was a big monumental step. But, there is a lot of things that happen to people in life that you can't explain. So I can tell you just being lucky is part of it. I mean, I've had a lot of luck in my life. I've had a lot of good luck and fair share of bad luck. But I bought that apartment complex not knowing that the city was going to widen the road.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that my apartment building was in the way of the road widening. And so they came to condemn the building, and they wanted to give me back just what I paid for it. And I got to thinking, this isn't going to work out very well because I bought this, I fixed it up. They want to buy it back from me for the same price I paid for it. Then I get to thinking, well, they only really need a portion of it to widen the road. It was a 12-unit apartment building. They just need the end. So I went to the city. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll sell you the land. I'll tear the end off the building, and I'll sell you the ground you need to widen for your road widening. I want to keep the 9 units because they were stacked, three apartments in a row. And I finally convinced them to do that. So I sold them that ground, and we tore down 3 units, but I got like half the money that I paid for the apartment building to sell the 3 units. So then I still own the apartment building. So, I mean, sometimes, you just get lucky, right? I mean, I did not plan that. That was just one of those things that happened. I had to work to convince them to do what they ultimately did, which made me some money. And then the craziest thing is I took the money that I got from that, and I had been buying properties I grew up on the south side of Des Moines, and there was a lot of Italians on the south side of Des Moines, and a lot of them were my dad's age. They were that generation, and they owned these buildings, and they were paid for. And I'd go to them, and I would ask them if they were tired of operating the building, running it, managing it, collecting rent. A lot of times they'd say, yeah, I'm tired of that. And I'd say, well, I'll give you an offer to buy it where you get the same income, but you wouldn't have to do anything. I just give you a check every month. Almost every one of them said yes. So I would ask them what they wanted for the property. I'd go back, I'd do a calculation, and I'd figure out what the first month's rent, what the real estate tax proration and the brokerage fee would be. And by that time, I had a broker's license. And I would offer to buy them on contract and give them that amount down, which they really didn't end up getting much of anything, but they were out of it. And then I would go in and improve the properties, give them their monthly payment. They liked it, worked for me because I was able to expand without having virtually any money. And that worked really well. And one of those I bought that way was at another intersection where we had another road widening. And I was able to sell the part of the parking off the building for, again, half of what I paid for the building. I mean, sometimes, you get lucky in your pursuit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to get out there and work, but, luck does enter into it. So those two things helped me a lot in the early days.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a huge factor. I think I heard this from my other friend's dad, that good luck happens where opportunity and hard work cross paths.
Where they intersect, where the intersection of hard work and that's true. I think you have to go out and get after it. The truth is, I've been luckier in that pursuit than a lot of people that I know, but there's no way to measure that. I don't know. When I bought that 12-plex, I had no way of knowing that it was going to turn out. We've had a lot. Don't get me wrong. We've had a lot of losses too over the years.
Sure.
Things are not all straight line on the angle up toward the upper right-hand side of the page. So fortunately, again, your losses and your mistakes need to come later on.
Right.
If they come early on, you're done because you have no safety net, right?
Right.
Later on, when you've had some success, have some money, and you make a mistake, it's not catastrophic.
Right.
But if it happens in the early days, it can become catastrophic pretty quickly.
Right.
Usually is.
Your dad, he continued helping you with these projects as you're moving along. So I assume at some point, obviously, you're not remodeling all these things yourself. You start outsourcing pieces of that.
Right.
But how involved is he during this progression?
Not real involved. He'd just help me. If I call him up and say, "Hey, Dad, could you help me do this?" He would generally do it. But by that point, he didn't work on the 12-plex demo. He didn't work on the office building parking lot reload. He would give me advice, but by that time, I'm really just doing my own thing. And I would ask him his advice and his opinion on things a lot. But bottom line is that at that point, I was pretty much doing what I thought I needed to do, progress. And it's always nice to have somebody that you trust, that you can always call up and ask their opinion. And he was always there for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Invaluable for sure. You mentioned this, I guess, formula that maybe you originated, this buying on contract from some of the individuals that lived on the South Side. Could you just walk me through structurally what that looks like? So they own a property outright. They're currently doing the property management on it, and that's their income. And you're just basically coming in and saying, I'll buy the whole thing, do the property management, and keep you constant dollars on your monthly check.
Yeah. So, instead
on the
of
other side of that, are you borrowing to buy the property? Like, if you could just walk me through.
No, they're carrying. Okay. So they're the bank.
Okay.
So they own it free and clear. Just round numbers, somebody back then, most of those properties were $100,000. Again, you got to get the context of time and values. $100,000 to $200,000 was. So you buy a little apartment building, you buy a little commercial building. The guy that owns it is getting you know, whatever he's getting. I mean, he's making $10,000 a year. Back in those days, 10% was kind of the rule of thumb. So make it easy. We'll say it's $1 million or 120,000. He's getting $12,000 a year, so he's getting $1,000 a month. Mm-hmm. So most of those guys, they had no loan on the property; they were paid for. So in order to buy, you also have to understand the context of time back then. Getting a loan from a bank was not an easy thing to do. Mm. Times are totally different today, but back then you had to beg to get a loan. They didn't want to loan out money to young people to do entrepreneurial type ventures, especially if you had no experience and no capital. Mm-hmm. So today, I mean, virtually everything that we know today got just turned upside down. Capital's not easy to come by. Capital's not cheap. People are more accommodating, generally speaking, as far as a society goes. So I just go to them and I'd say, look, you're going to get your $1,000 a month, but you got to finance it for me, so that you got to sell it to me. And it was on contract. So you write a land contract, you start paying them interest at a certain rate and mortgage payment at a certain rate. And you're going to get your money. And I would figure out what I would get. So basically what they got was the first month's rent out of that formula. So you've got the real estate tax proration, which they owed taxes that weren't paid yet. That's what that is. So that was an obligation they had. That comes out of their pocket, whether they sold it to me or somebody else. The real estate commission is something that they would have to accept because typically you'd pay a broker to sell it. So what they really ended up with was the amount of the first month's rent. So we closed on the 31st, first month's rent comes in. I would write them a check, but I would go out and collect the first month's rent from all the tenants. So that's really what they got. And then the next month they got their mortgage payment or their contract payment. Mm-hmm. And it was a way to grow. It was a way to scale without having any money, is basically what it was, or experience or credit. And it worked really well for me at that point in my career when I was young. I mean, heck, I was in my 20s. Didn't have any money, didn't have any experience, and banks were very difficult to deal with at that point.
So you're kind of circumventing the bank in this model.
Yeah, they're not involved at all.
Yeah. So banks they're selling the property to you, but it's kind of on not an earn out basis.
Well, the owner's selling it to me.
Yeah.
And they're financing it.
Got it.
The seller's financing it.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. And they get paid, they're making as much money as they were making by running the property, but they didn't have to invest in repairs and maintenance, and they didn't have to release, and they didn't have to chase tenants for payment.
Got it. So then you're expanding your real estate footprint, but not off your own balance sheet, really, because you're not putting up the money, right? You're paying it over time.
Right.
And then what opportunity did that give you? You now had the opportunity to go in and improve the property and increase rents?
Well, yeah. I mean, we go in and improve it, and improve the physical, improvements on the property, improve the lease it to tenants that might pay a little more rent when the lease is rolled over, do all those types of things to improve the property. And all the time being absolutely 100% sure that I was always paying the contract holder their payment on time, 100%, because they all talk. Mm-hmm. And so once you did it a few times, they would all talk. They would ask, is this guy any good? Oh, yeah, I sold a building to him. He pays me every month like clockwork. Well, it makes it a lot easier for me to continue to do that. And so always make sure we paid everybody on time. And the system worked. It worked for quite a while. System wouldn't work today. I don't think that system would get you very far, but back in those days, it worked just fine.
It wouldn't work today for the reasons you mentioned earlier, where everything's different now, like capital's less.
Oh, it wouldn't work today because very few people own properties without a mortgage.
Right. Makes sense.
Number two, most properties have turned over. There was not that many people that were real estate investors back then. So you didn't have that much competition. Today, you got so much money chasing real estate that finding properties that are out there owned by somebody that's owned it for 30 years and has no mortgage on it, probably be hard to do, hard to find. And if you could find it, getting them to sell it to you that way would be difficult, probably. I think the way things evolve for me would not be a very easy path today, just because it's a different world.
Yeah.
It's not 1970s, it's 2020s, and the world's changed.
Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, CrowdHealth. CrowdHealth is a Bitcoin-enabled alternative to legacy health insurance. Now let's face it, legacy health insurance is an absolute scam. Nobody can explain this better than the legendary comedian Chris Rock.
Insurance. You got to have some insurance. You got to. There's an insurance. They shouldn't even call it insurance. They should just call it in case shit. Like, I give a company some money in case shit happens. Now, if shit don't happen, shouldn't I get my money back?
So with CrowdHealth, instead of just paying premiums that you'll never see again, you can hold part of this pool of savings in dollars and in Bitcoin through CrowdHealth. And when you have a health event, you can draw against this pool of communal savings. So go to joincrowdhealth.com/breedlove to learn more or sign up. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Wasabi Wallet. Wasabi lets you use Bitcoin privately while still maintaining full control over your money. Specifically, Wasabi Wallet is an open source, non-custodial wallet with privacy built in by default. By using Wasabi, you're effectively putting the private back in private property. Wasabi Wallet is an easy-to-use privacy wallet that can support any amount of Bitcoin transactions. So go to wasabiwallet.io today to download this state-of-the-art wallet software.
Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Bitcoin Conference 2023. This 3-day event will be held May 18th through 20th in Miami Beach. This is going to be the biggest event of the year, as it always is. And the past 2 years in Miami have simply been amazing. Day 1's Industry Day. Days 2 and 3 are going to be open to general admission. And I'd say this is a great place to go and network with Bitcoiners or even look for a job. Just a really all-around great experience. There's a fantastic speaker lineup, including Michael Saylor, Zoltan Pozar, Lynn Alden, Alex Gladstein, many others. And last year, we did a 10 million sats giveaway for this event, and we're going to do it again this year. So to get discounted tickets and enter for a chance to win 10 million sats, go to b.tc/conference/2023 and use code BREEDLOVE.
Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Casa. Casa makes it simple to buy and secure your Bitcoin without wondering whether you're doing it right. Specifically, Casa provides a multi-key custody solution, which is by far the most secure way to custody your Bitcoin. Now, when I talk about Bitcoin being theft-proof money or inviolable private property, a multi-key custody model is exactly what I am talking about. Using multiple keys lets you maintain full control of your Bitcoin while also giving you redundancy in case you lose one of the keys. It's also the best way to secure your Bitcoin for inheritance planning purposes. So go to keys.casa, that's today to sign up and use discount code BREEDLOVE.
All right, you start with a repo house, you get into duplexes, then the apartment complexes, you start doing this buying on contract model. When do you cross the chasm from residential real estate to commercial real estate investment and development?
Well, I had always, I was heading that direction. That's why I was buying those little buildings from people, trying to improve them in every way, physically and financially. And so, I just wanted to, the apartments were difficult to manage from a small business perspective. On the south side of Des Moines, it took a lot of manpower to keep them going and released and remodeled. And I got to thinking, well, it's going to be a lot easier to deal with these commercial buildings because you don't have people, businesses, right? So they don't move in and out as frequently as some guy loses his job at John Deere on the line, just packs up and moves out. Or SOL. So I get to thinking, well, that's going to be a lot easier for me to manage, the commercial stuff rather than the residential properties. And so I get to focusing on that and bought a building from a bank, a repo building that was completely vacant, and leased it, sold it, and it worked out really well. And I'm going to work one day and I stop at a gas station and I'm thinking, they're expanding these all the time. They're convenience stores at that point. They're early model convenience stores. And I get to thinking, well, these guys gotta, if they're going to expand dramatically, back then, it was not the same as it is today. You don't have these huge chains. You had lots of smaller companies that were regional or local in nature. So there was one company that was an Iowa company that had started in a small town, moved to Des Moines, and they were expanding. I got to thinking, well, I'm gonna reach out to them, see if I can convince them to let me do some of their real estate, because again, they've got this whole organization working to provide the product. If anything I learned in college rings true, it was that most businesses' second largest expense is real estate behind their employees. Maybe I can get a piece of that. So I do a little bit of research and I figure out that most of those companies were making returns in the teens, 13, 15, 18%, whatever, depending upon the brand. And I think, well, the real estate piece of it back then was 9%, 8.5%. So I think, well, if I could convince the owners to sell the real estate to me or let me build it at 8.5% or 9%, they could take that money, open another store, and earn almost double. So now I just need to convince them that this model makes sense for them. And without giving up any control because they're all real protective of control of the real estate. So at that time, net lease was a very, very embryonic concept. Not my concept, but it was just getting started, and there was not very much of that going on. Primarily happening in the convenience store space because people were scared of the environmental impact of convenience stores back then. And the companies would wanted to retain control, and the owners wanted the companies to retain control because no owner wants to be responsible for underground. So at any rate, I got an appointment with the owner of the company, and I just said, I just want 15 minutes of your time. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Answer's no, I'll leave, and we'll have lost 15 minutes. But I'd like you and your CFO to be there. So I go and meet with them, and I say, can you tell me what your average return is on your stores? The guy says like 15%. I said, okay, that's question number 1. This is my second question. If you could sell your real estate or develop your real estate for about 60 to 65% of that, would you be interested? Both said yes. And I said, well, that's why I'm here. Because what I propose is that we would build or buy your real estate at a 9% return. You take the money, you've got all these stores you already own, and we'll buy a bunch of them, as many as we can. Take that money and open more stores. You're going to make the differential between 9 and 15 or 6%, or grow your brand. It will help with your advertising. All the metrics work to your favor as far as employees, management, all those things. And they said yes. And so we started doing a lot of that type of thing. And I started doing it for multiple brands back in those. And this was, again, you have to keep the context. This was in the 80s. So there were no net lease REITs back then, to my knowledge. That even came into play until the 90s somewhere. So it was pretty new to the game at that point. And again, I didn't create it. I just took the concept and ran with it.
So in that transaction, they own the store, they own the real estate. There's then selling you the real estate and then leasing it back from you, but maintaining full control over the real estate.
Right. Yeah. So what it does for me is we own a property. We have no management responsibility. The tenant retains control. They're 24/7 operation. They want snow removal 24/7. They do it. If they close from 2 to 6 a.m. or 5 a.m., they do that. They retain control of the whatever happens on the site, from mechanical, electrical, lighting. It's just the same as if they own it. The only difference is that they pay us a rent factor every month, but nothing changes from their operational standpoint. And that's really important. It was really important to those companies that they didn't want to lose operational control. They didn't want some guy like me relying on me to give them snow removal in the middle of winter in Des Moines, Iowa.
Right.
Because what if I didn't do it? And what if we didn't, maintain the landscaping and it looked bad? I mean, so we try to overcome all the objections to doing it, which is what I was doing back in those days. And I got lucky that the companies, again, luck enters into it. The companies that we were doing this for, all of them did well. All of them survived. All of them have performed. And, we didn't have any of those bankrupt or turn the properties back to us before the lease was over. And so, again, you have to work hard, but you also have to have a little bit of luck that the companies and the direction you go and the choices you make are going to be good ones.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them you control and some of them you don't. I don't control those companies. I didn't have anything to do with the operations. So once I made that decision, it was on other people to make those companies successful. When I'm buying properties and improving them myself and leasing them myself, that's on me. But the sale leaseback thing, or the build to suit world, you're picking a company, you're picking your horse and you're riding it, and you're not in control of it at that point.
And in the event that they defaulted on the lease, then you have to go in and kick them all out and then get it up to snuff to sell it and liquidate the property. So there's risk there for you, I assume.
Oh yeah. I mean, we've had it. To tell you the truth, we have not ever had a convenience store do that, but we've had restaurants do it.
Mm.
And every time that happens, you lose money.
Mm.
I mean, it's getting back a purpose-built property is, generally speaking, a money-losing proposition because it's not what somebody else wants.
Mm-hmm.
You purpose-build it for this use, this brand. The next user wants something completely different. Half the time, you end up knocking it down. Now you're down to land value. I mean, we've had sit-down restaurants that we built for $2.5 million, sold them for land value for $1 million, or 100,000. I mean, that's just how it works. If they go bad, they go really bad. So hopefully you don't have a lot of them that go bad. You can't really afford. I mean, you probably chew up the profits on 4 or 5 properties for each one that goes bad. So
Right.
yeah, you can't make that mistake too many times.
So you're doing a lot of diligence, I imagine, on the front end on the operation and the viability and
today it's so technical. All the REITs have research departments and underwriting departments. I mean, keep in mind, I was just a guy. The research that I was doing was pretty nominal back in the 80s or early 90s. I mean, looking at a financial statement, trying to analyze that, talking to their banker, trying to get store sales. I mean, that's basically the amount of due diligence you could do. And then a lot of it was just intuition and operationally, you look at it and you say, these guys are doing a really good job. People love coming to this brand. I'm going to take a risk with them. I think they're winners. That doesn't mean they will be, doesn't mean they won't be. Some of it's just, how is this brand perceived in the market?
Right.
Fortunately, the ones that we chose were perceived well and have done well. So again, there's no silver bullet. You can't there's nothing you can do to eliminate risk out of any investment. They all have a certain degree of risk, whether it's location. And we had one property in Phoenix where they changed the exit off the 101 and crushed the store. I mean, the store, the user moved to the new exit ramp and their lease expired and we ended up with a dead store. I mean, that's just part of the risk of doing what we do. I wasn't mad at them. I mean, and they lived out their lease term, so there's nothing to be upset about. But we had a property where we had improvements for a convenience store that's on a road that no longer connects to the 101. I mean, it was just, and so we ended up again selling up for land value, which was another, $1 million some loss. But again, that's part of it.
Right.
The more anybody that tells you that they're in, I don't care if it's real estate, cars, stocks and bonds, that they never lose money, they've never made a mistake. They're either doing no business or lying. I don't care who it is. Warren Buffett's not that good. Nobody's that good. And so if you're doing a fair amount of business, you will make mistakes and you will get your nose bloodied and it will happen. The key is to not let it get you down, not let it happen to you, as I mentioned earlier, early in your career when you have no safety net, and learn from the mistake, learn from it. And hopefully it will serve you well going forward. But I don't know what, just like I didn't know that they were going to expand the road and take off part of my apartment building. And I'm that was a windfall.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you plan for that. You don't know what cities are going to do. I didn't know that ADOT was going to move the exit ramp off of the 101.
Mm.
Some of it's just luck. And
Yeah.
I don't know how to quantify that other than sometimes it goes your way and sometimes it goes against you.
Yeah, that's
Fortunately for me, the bad luck happened after I was able to withstand it.
right.
That's the key.
Yeah. Almost the distinguishing feature between risk and uncertainty, perhaps, is that, risk, presumably you can quantify to some extent, at least estimate, but uncertainty, I mean, those are the unknown unknowns, right? This shit's going to happen sometimes. Is there a particular loss that comes to mind, or doesn't have to be a financial loss necessarily, but any failure or failing that's happened along the way that stands out to you and a lesson you took away from it?
Are you talking financial, business, personal?
I would say just business or financial, probably focused, just along the line of your career path. But I'm happy to go any direction you want. If you think something, I'm trying to get to the lesson where you earned the wisdom is what I was really trying to get to.
I've made lots of mistakes along the way. The financial losses, I always view it, I can always make more money.
Yeah.
There's never been a financial loss that I couldn't overcome. Just get out and work harder. And 4 kids and a wife, virtually no real money. The early days, which I didn't touch on, but when I was buying those buildings from the apartments and all that, and I got married, and then our first kids were twins, I just frankly was not making enough money to survive. We weren't making enough money to live. So I took a job working on the railroad. I'd go in at 4:00 at night and work till 1 or 2 in the morning, come home, go to sleep, get up, do real estate, go back to work at 4, work to 1 or 2, just to survive. And that was a period of time where I just was not, it didn't happen immediately for me. It was not like the fixing up the houses worked really well. When you're a young guy, you're single, you have very little expense, you're living on your own, you need money for food, gas, and to go out with your friends on Friday and Saturday night. End of story. Mm-hmm. Pay your rent or pay for the mortgage. Once I got married and then all of a sudden had kids and I had a wife and then all of a sudden 2 kids, now you got 4 people trying to live off. That did not work. The metrics of what I was making wasn't nearly enough to pay for diapers and formula and all the things that, I had to do. So that's what I did, and did it for as long as I could stand it. And so I had some initial success, then some initial failures. I don't know if failures was the right terminology. It might be more, initial, downtime where I really wasn't clicking to the extent I needed to be. Mm-hmm. And then I just decided, I'm sitting out on a track in the middle of Iowa on the switch crew in the middle of the winter. And I'm sitting there thinking, this can't go on. I gotta do something. I can't work full time at the railroad and half time or 3/4 time in real estate. I gotta do something better. I just decided I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna quit this job. I'm gonna zero in on real estate, and I'm gonna find a way to make it work. I don't care what it is. I'm gonna make it work. My wife said, you should just give it up. Get a real job. Go do something where we don't have to worry about whether we're going to survive or not. Now, keep in mind, this was back when I was 20, whatever, 26 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, I think for all of us, there's an inflection point in your life where you decide, I'm going to do this, whatever that is. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get through law school. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get through med school, whatever it is. But there's an inflection point where people decide, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to make a career out of this.
Mm.
And so that's what I did. And I came back and quit the railroad, and I just zeroed in and just did whatever I needed to do. I mean, I just brokered, bought, sold, remodeled, you name it. And the story I just told about the C stores came after this. That was after that was probably in my early 30s then, by the time I came to that realization that I need to work with big companies who were growing and expanding and needing. In those days, they needed people like me. As crazy as that sounds, they needed 30-something-year-old real estate guys to help them grow their business, because the people with real money, the CalPERS of the world and the Principal Financials of the world, they wouldn't even look at them. They wouldn't give them the time of day. So they needed little people like me. Now, today, we still deal with those companies, but if they do that, they make one phone call to an institution. They sell whatever they want to sell with one phone call. They don't call me anymore, and they don't need me.
Huh.
But the point is, we all go through these different periods where we're valuable to a certain class of user, product, whatever it may be, and then we either grow out of it or they grow out of us. And in that particular instance, those companies have grown out of me. I haven't necessarily grown out of them, but that's okay, because we still are doing business with them, and it's allowed us to do business with other companies. So we're doing business with, I don't know how many companies we have now. We have 175 properties. We probably have 60, 70 different companies we do business with. So it's worked fine. But my point is that you can't, nothing stays constant,
Mm-hmm.
right? You always have to be looking for the next opportunity. We have benefited from those relationships, and the ones that are honest will admit that they benefited from working with companies like ours back then.
Mm.
So it's interesting to see the evolution over time of the way things work and the way companies grow.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you said something to me offline earlier that it was, I think you said it like this, figuring out how to leverage expertise, thought, and capital. And I mean, it sounds like you leave the railroad and then you just decide you're going to do this sort of come hell or high water, right? You just get scrappy and make it work. And man, there's really something to that. Like, I don't know that there's a real success story out there that doesn't have some ingredient of that. So the inflection point, as you described. What is it? So today, I guess we should talk about what you do today. You basically you got into the early days of this triple net lease, sell leaseback model, and that's what you have continued to do through to today. And now that's what made you guys a super regional kind of real estate firm. Have things changed more since then? Is there anything else to add, or has it just been a matter of scaling out that model?
Oh, I mean, it's changing all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, the evolution continues, but so happened was that it didn't change immediately. You know, when I quit the railroad and
Sure.
my wife says, "You what? You know, I mean, what are we going to do now?" And basically, you know, I just doubled down.
Yeah.
I was already working like 18 hours a day. The only difference was I put the 12 hours that I was working at the railroad into real estate.
Right.
And it didn't produce a lot in the beginning. You know, I mean, it was noticeable. I mean, we were making money, but barely making enough money.
Yeah.
And, you know, the thing about it is that I just decided that I am going to find a way to do this, whatever it is. And, you know, so, I mean, I did a little bit. I mean, we built houses, we remodeled houses, we owned apartments, we owned office buildings, retail buildings. Anything where I felt like I could make some money, that's what, there had to be an element of reasonable profitability that was, in my mind, tangible, and we'd go after it because that's what I needed to do. I needed to scale up because, as you know, I mean, you don't make a ton of money off of one small real estate investment if you're leveraged, right? You make a little bit of money every month over a long period of time. So I figured, you know, I've got to find a way to continue to grow this in order to make enough money for it to be viable. I honestly never dreamt that we would be where we are today. I mean, keep in mind, if you go back to the time when I'm working on the railroad, what's my goal? My goal is just to feed my family and survive. That was my goal. Make a living. That's all I was after at that moment in time. It hasn't been until, you know, much more recent years where we're buying portfolios and we're buying stuff all over the country and we're doing, you know, estate planning and all that. I mean, that was not on my mind. And my kids working with me now, of course, they were obviously either not born yet or just born back in those days. But where we are today is that there was no grand plan to build a regional company. The plan was, I want to be good enough to comfortably support my family. That was the original goal. And I'm really big on goal setting. And, you know, so the goal was, I got to figure that out. I got to make it so we're not, you know, always worried about whether or not we're going to make enough money to survive. And then once that got done, then it was, okay, let's build a nicer house and build a new house. And let's have our house be paid for. And then we don't want to be owing for our cars. So let's, you know, you just continuously challenge yourself, right? To do the next thing. And then it was, okay, well, let's see if we can get a new account. Let's see if I became a Walgreens developer. We built Walgreens stores for 10 years, you know, and can we build we built for Hollywood Video and Blockbuster back when they were, I mean, you know, it's just the evolution of it. You just keep finding the next opportunity. I mean, if you're a Hollywood Video or Blockbuster developer today, you'd be, you know, pushing up daisies. I mean, you know, you just got to move with it.
Yeah.
The market does not wait for you. You gotta stay running right with it. So, I mean, that's kind of, I mean, how I approached it was that I just have to find a solution and just work as hard as I possibly can to get these relationships, nurture them, build for them. And one of our key elements is we have a lot of good sized companies that we've done just a boatload of repeat business with. because they know if they call us to do something, that if we tell them we'll do it, we'll get it done, and we'll get it done on time. And that's important a lot of times. Is get it done on time. Our competition most of the time are public REITs, and there's a lot of things they can do we can't do. They have more money than we do, generally speaking. I mean, we're completely internally funded, so we're all just our family office money. So they can do things we can't do, but the things that we can do that they can't do is when a publicly traded or even a private company wants something done and they want it done fast. We can beat the REITs virtually any day of the week at getting things done, because you talk to me and I say we have a deal. We have a deal. There is no, research department,
Right,
no
right.
analytics. There's no investment committee. There's no corporate counsel that has to bless every. I just say do it and it gets done.
Right.
So that's really our only advantage, to be honest with you, is that we have relationships and we get things done. If we tell somebody we'll do it, we'll do it.
That's great. Yeah, just much more agile, and then a little bit. Well, obviously, you've developed the reputation. Didn't just come, like you had to develop that over time. But it's a fantastic asset to have, obviously. What then was there you mentioned the point of just, this isn't working, right? Working on the railroad, working on real estate, had to zero in on real estate and make that work. That was your inflection point. Was there an opposite side to that? Was there some point along this path that you feel like, oh, we made it in a way? Obviously there's no final destination, but you achieved a point where you didn't have as much of this, I guess it was existential stress, right? How you're going to feed your family and whatnot. Was there another point on the journey that you felt maybe the opposite of that dark feeling you felt near the railroad days?
I would say it's kind of funny because a few years back, when there was a big push for companies to go public, real estate investment trusts, smaller companies like ours, the mortgage bank, or not the mortgage bankers, but the bankers from Wall Street, wanted us to consider going public. And I thought about that, and I thought, we're not that big. We're bigger than some of the small REITs. I mean, the really small ones, but nothing like most of them are, and 20, 30 billion, we're not even close to that. But the point is that I thought, what are we going to do? We're going to get a whole bunch of other people's money, and then we're going to get on the hamster wheel, and we're going to run that much harder to try to make money for them like we're making for us. And we've already climbed this far up the ladder. Might as well just keep going. There's no reason. We don't really need, we could become a lot bigger if we had a lot more money, but I don't know that we necessarily need to grow that way. We're growing, organically anyhow. And the truth is that I don't know that it's nice to know that you've got to a certain point where people recognize it. But on the other hand, we're not trying to be the next, big REIT. We're not trying to compete with them. We're not Realty Income. We never will be. That's not our goal. So I think what we're doing, for us works fine. We enjoy it, and we don't have the reporting and regulation. And I like to answer I guess that's just a long way around to answer your question. I like knowing that whatever decision's made, it's our money. And if I make a mistake, and we lose $1 million or $2 million or whatever the number is, we're losing our money. We're not losing somebody else's money.
Mm.
And I got nobody to blame but myself. And I don't want somebody calling me up being upset that I made a bad call.
Mm.
And I've made a few bad calls. So it's just easier, I guess, for me to think that whatever we do, we control our destiny. We don't have other people to account to. And I think that works pretty well for us, at least at this moment in time.
So
we had to get to a certain size for it to work. We couldn't compete with keep in mind, we're competing under 100 million. So if it's over 100 million, we're not in the game. But to compete under 100 million, there's plenty of deals out there that we had to get to be a certain size where we could actually compete. We've done, a number of deals between $50 and $80 million single transactions. So, that puts us, head to head with some of the bigger REITs for those kind of deals.
Right.
So that's fine. That works for us.
So you mentioned you're big on goal setting, and that seems like it's been pretty formative to your entire career path here, right? Like you get a spot, and maybe this is wisdom you got from your dad, right? Just figure it out. No matter what the situation is, figure it out. Where are you now with goal setting? Like what keeps you going? I spent a little time with you in Iowa once, and it sure seems like you are very enthralled by your work still. Like I did not see any slack or laziness or boredom. Like you seem invigorated by it. You're into it. You're on the move. Like what is the goal setting for you now?
Well, I think it's easy to do what I do if you're me. Okay. And let me explain. When they ask me to speak to high school seniors, when they ask me to speak at colleges, I have a really simple message for these kids. Find something that you're passionate about, that you can make a living at, persevere. It's that simple. If you're doing something that you love, it doesn't work for me to come to work every day. I enjoy what I do. Now, don't get me wrong. There are days that I don't enjoy it. There's things that happen that I don't like. There's parts of the job that I don't enjoy. But by and large, probably 90% of what I do, I love, and I love the challenge of it. And so for me, it's not work. I enjoy what I do. I like the challenge of finding a deal, negotiating a deal, closing a deal. It's just fun. And so now it's a scorecard. We had a big goal that I've been just striving for years that we achieved last year. And so I just set a bigger goal. Until I either A, don't enjoy it, or B, I'm physically not able to do it, I'd say that I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. But that's the key for most people, in my opinion. If you can find a career that allows you to do something that you really are passionate about and enjoy doing, you're never going to work another day in your life. You're going to enjoy what you do. I like meeting with people. I like doing this. It's something new and different. I appreciate you asking me. Yeah. I like going to conferences and conventions and meeting new people and talking about the trade. It depends on how you're built. I'm looking at our CPA. She doesn't like to do what I do, and I don't like to do what she does. And that's what makes the world go round.
Yeah.
And our attorney's in the other room, and she likes to go in and close the door with the documents and sit in there all day. That would drive me out of my mind. I couldn't do it. Day in and day out, reading documents and commenting and no, thank you. But she loves it. That's her passion.
Yeah.
It's the CPA's passion to go through the numbers. It's not my passion. I'm a salesman and a deal guy, and I like getting out there and doing what we do. I'm a little impulsive, drives them nuts. I will make a deal and wire out money, and they'll say, you can't do that. Well, I just did it. You can't do it. We don't have documents. You can't. Well, go get the documents. I don't know what to tell you. But, it just drives them crazy. And I don't know. I just enjoy what I do. And I think it's really the key for careers. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Simple yet difficult, I think, to find that thing for a lot of people. I know it took me a long time. I also sense, and I mean, I could be wrong here, but you seem to be a man that loves his freedom as well, right? That you had an opportunity to grow by taking outside money. You didn't do that. You've more or less been working for yourself your whole career. This is obviously something that's very near and dear to my heart as well. I often joke that I'm unemployable. That's why I do what I do, just work for myself. What does freedom mean to you?
Well, that's interesting. I have worked for other people. I along the way, and then I had, an opportunity after I started the company to work for the biggest real estate company in town for a while. And that was a good experience for me. And I kept my little investment company going while that happened. But freedom for me is that I get to do what I love. I mean, I enjoy the real estate business. One of the reasons I didn't do well in the military is I am very independent. I think most people that are self-employed are. They don't like to have people tell them what to do. I am a type A. I am a self-starter. I am goal-oriented. I do certain things that I don't like to do only because I know it will help me get to where I want to go. I think that's a discipline that people have to learn. It's not something that you want, doing things you don't want to do to achieve a goal is not particularly enjoyable, right? But you have to learn that is part of the process. So, and having the freedom to do that if I choose to do things that I don't enjoy to achieve the goal, that's part of it too. So I have to tell you, I think being independent is one of those things that the American enterprise system allows for. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, no problem. There's plenty of good jobs and lots of companies for people that don't want to go out and take on everything it takes to start your business, run your business, take the risk of buying, investing, developing, whatever it is you're doing. So it's a good thing that we're not all alike, or we'd have a real problem, right? So,
That's a great point. There would be no economics if we were all alike.
right, exactly.
Well, Richard, man, I have to thank you. You have shared quite a broad spectrum of wisdom here going through your life journey. And I know I've taken away a lot here. I wrote down a couple of things. A man has got to know his limitations, take it a floor at a time, and nothing stays constant. Were just three of the pieces of wisdom that I took from this conversation. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this. If my audience wants to find out more about you or your firm, where should they go?
HurdRealty.com.
Hurd Realty. That's HURD Realty.com.
Yep. HURDREALTY.com. And our website tells you pretty much everything you need to know in a macro sense about our company. And it's interesting to see where we've come in. We've been around 40 years. All three of my kids are working here. And I love that. And, we're going to keep on going, and the next generation will take over at some point. I'll ride off into the sunset.
A beautiful place to end it. Richard, thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks.